Welcome to Agrabah, city of mystery, of enchantment, of the finest merchandise this side of the River Jordan. I can see that you are only interested in the exceptionally rare. I think, then, you would be most rewarded to consider this. Like so many things, it is not what is outside, but what is inside that counts. This lamp once changed the course of a young man's life. After all my years of searching, at last, the Cave of Wonders. Now, remember, the rest of the treasure is yours, but the lamp is mine.
Disturbs my slumber.
It is I, Gazim, a humble thief.
Know this. Only one may enter here. One whose worth lies deep within. The diamond in the rough.
Oh no! So, only one may enter. I must find this one. This diamond in the rough. Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Play Disney's Aladdin by Capcom for the Super Nintendo, notably distinct from the Interplay version that was done on the Sega Genesis, which I'll cover at a later date. Worth noting, it is complete coincidence that I'm doing 2 Disney games in a row. I generally wrote the order of games I wanted to do over the last couple of years, over several years, and I haven't updated that list since like early 2024 at the latest, I think. So Aladdin in this game's big deal is that he's incredibly acrobatic. There's going to be pegs coming out of the walls, coming out of the floor, you can see one on the bottom right now even, and other platforms that you can jump on top of that he'll immediately flip off of or that you can swing off of. And right now I'm actively going for one of the hardest things to grab in the game in my eyes, the very first collectible. We need to grab onto the corner of this platform up here, and doing so requires you to jump off of that specific peg below us at like the very apex of Aladdin's left to right swing, and that is surprisingly hard to do, especially for being the first collectible. The item we grabbed up there was a red gem. There are 10 of those per overall stage scattered across the various stage subsections, 70 in total across the game. We are grabbing all of them in this playthrough, though if you're going for quote-unquote everything, you only actively need about 50 of them for reasons we'll cover in the final part. Worth noting, I said overall stages a moment ago. That's because this is one of those games where every level is broken up into subsection stages. So there's like 1-1, 1-2, 1-3. The 10 red gems within a specific level can be scattered across those stages in various amounts. For instance, I think there's like 4 here in the first section of 1-1. This here is a gold scarab. Grab that and you now gain access to a bonus minigame at the end of the subsection stage you're currently in. So Aladdin in this game, he does a lot of swinging, of course, but he actually doesn't have too much in terms of an offensive moveset. The main thing he has is either throwing apples with the A button, which largely only stuns enemies, or doing the good old platformer jump off their head deal. With that said, you can also use that for platforming utility, as you do gain some air with that. Plus, a few moments ago, we ended up grabbing a sheet at the top of the level design. That's effectively an upgrade you get after every death. When you have the sheet, you can hold R while in midair to glide down slowly. Using that in tandem with swinging off of certain objects, you can get a lot of air and get through the stages in this game very quickly. This is the bonus minigame the Golden Scarab gave us. It's a roulette wheel with the genie, which actively gives you several different benefits. Either it'll give you a 1-up or a 2-up outright. Rolling the heart will either restore some of your health or give you an extra life if your health is already at max. And the genie head, I believe, either increases your health period by 1 heart, or if your health is at max, which we'll talk about in a few moments, you'll actively gain 3 extra lives. So let's talk the health system. Specifically, the health that we have is the hearts at the top left of the screen, of course. Your health stays between missions. So in the case I took a hit at the very end of the last stage, I would still be at 3 health here, barring being healed by the bonus round we just went through. But either through the results of the bonus minigame, or by collecting gems, you can increase your health from a minimum of 3 hearts all the way up to 10, which I believe stays between deaths. I forget if it stays between continues, though. I haven't gotten a proper game over in this game in a good while. Or at least I haven't gotten one and continued playing. Back in my early emulation days, this was one of those I would just pick up and play a couple stages of and then just put down because I figured something else I wanted to do out. Specifically going back to the health system, you need 100 gems in order to get a health up. After you max out your health, though, grabbing 100 gems just gives you another extra life. So something you constantly want to be doing in this game that doesn't really matter in the first 2 stages or so, is you want to be constantly holding down the Y button because it is an active run button. And as is pretty traditional in video games, running faster also makes you jump further and higher, and there's some jumps in mid to late game that become quite a bit easier to approach with that in mind. But it is something I actively missed quite easily on my first playthrough because I first played this, I forget if it was via emulator or Wii Virtual Console, one of the 2 of those. And I didn't have the manual, so I just didn't know about the run button. It was very much kind of like my first playthrough of Super Metroid, where I didn't know about the run button in that game. Though, I think it's also partially because Aladdin's just general walking animation feels like what would be a run in some other games, because he just has a lot of energy in him. Not for nothing, this game's sprite work is fantastic. Now, a trick that you can figure out pretty early in that's really nice to know is that Aladdin does have a lot of invincibility frames in this game as he's flipping off of stuff. Specifically, as you're jumping off an enemy, swinging on a peg like this, you have a lot of invincibility frames you can use to outright damage other enemies. Heck, in some stages, you can even sort of badnik bounce right out of Sonic, where you can just bounce from one enemy to another, and I think there's even some red gems that require doing that. Which, notably, some of the red gems get kind of devious in their placement, but thankfully, in order to get the secret that's hidden behind them, you don't need all of them, you just need a majority, which, again, we'll talk about in the final part. Speaking of which, we're coming up on what's probably the scariest red gem in the first few stages to me. There's gonna be one near these swinging platforms. We need to hang off the edge of one of them to grab it. And Aladdin in this game controls generally pretty well, but there's times where I feel like his grab range is either too wide or too precise depending on the moment, and I think it really has something to do with the swinging of the hitboxes of some platforms like that. I have died getting that one more times than I'd like to admit. So, I briefly already mentioned my own history with the game. This was one of those I experienced mostly through emulation in the early days of me emulating games. My brother definitely has a lot more history with it overall because he talked a lot about playing this and the Genesis version growing up and having a lot of trouble with one specific level in the Genesis version. I feel like anyone who knows. But the main reason I'm actively doing an LP of it is because this is actively one of the childhood favorite games of my wife. The movie itself is also one of her favorite movies of all time, to the point where she watched it so many times the VHS started wearing out, which, yeah, that's something I did too with at least 1 or 2 movies. Time for our first boss fight, the scimitar-wielding merchant. He's only really got 2 attacks, either a general sword swing, or after you damage him, a barrage of sword swings as he slowly approaches you. You can stand behind the barrel here on the bottom left to completely avoid all hits from him. You can throw an apple at him as he's about to attack to get an extra second, but the main thing you want to do here is wait for him to attack, and then jump on him as he's preparing his swing. It's a surprisingly tight window, though, not for nothing for a first boss, so don't be surprised if you take some silly hits here early on. That's stage 1 in its entirety. Like several other movie-based games, since the dawn of video gaming really, we're going to have scenes detailing the movie's plot in between stages. This stage clear screen not only gives you your password for the stage in question, but is also where you tally up the red gems you found throughout the stage. You know you get all 10 if, well, all 10 slots are filled. Is it me or does the Sultan look like he just told a really bad joke and is waiting for the reactions? Together, Aladdin and Jasmine escape the Sultan's guards and run to Aladdin's home high above Agrabah. There, they enjoy the view and discuss their dreams for the future. Unfortunately, they are found by the guards, who drag Aladdin off to the palace dungeon and Jasmine back to her father, the Sultan. Aladdin is thrown into the deepest cell of the dungeon. But all he can think about is the beautiful princess. A strange old man appears, offering to set Aladdin free if he'll come on an adventure to the Cave of Wonders. Glad to get out of prison, Aladdin doesn't suspect that the old man is actually Jafar in disguise. Geez, just spoiling the movie, huh? Welcome to the Cave of Wonders, pretty suddenly, admittedly. Not for nothing, the game does actively accelerate its difficulty pretty fast here. As the more closed-in nature of the Cave of Wonders means there's a lot more hazards in your way, like spikes and bottomless pits. Bottomless pits are one-hit kills, of course. With that said, the spikes in this game are not, they just do a pip of health. So you need to watch out for some of the stalactites in this level, as they are both something you can flip off of like the pegs, but if you're on them for too long, they will fall. With that said, once they fall into the spikes below, should any exist, that is, you can safely flip off the flat top of them. Worth noting, it actively is a lot less dangerous than it looks when they're in the spikes, though, as Aladdin does do a good job of homing in onto things he can grab outside of some corner clings here and again. I don't know what it is, maybe it's just the general height of his sprite that's throwing me off or what, but there's times where I'm near the corner of a platform like the one I just grabbed, and Aladdin just won't grab it for some reason. This specifically happens usually in like 3 specific sub-stages in this game, but we'll talk more about those as we go. Watch out on this platform here, by the way. The thinner sections will fall out below you as you walk over them. But that said, you need to do that to get a red gem right there. As a general example, just being above these stalagmites right here, Aladdin will be able to just jump on the tip of them, no problem, without any input from you. Honestly, I feel like this game would be a lot harder if they made you have to do a special input to do flips and all that. I'm actively really glad they took the shortcut there and just made it a little bit simpler for us to digest. Watch out for the skeleton, by the way. It's like the only time that enemy shows up, but for some reason, I'm really bad about running into it and just forgetting it's there whenever I revisit this game. And that's the end of the first subsection of the Cave of Whoa, hi! I've always loved that walking animation for the carpet. I don't know why. There's something just so silly about it. As we go into the bonus stage, I want to start talking about this game's staff a little bit, though. Specifically, the main planner for this game is Shinji Mikami, who we've covered before several times on the channel. Specifically, he wasn't just the main game designer for Goof Troop, he's also the creator of Resident Evil, The Evil Within, as well as Hi-Fi Rush. This was his 3rd ever project, specifically after Super Buster Bros. On the Super Nintendo, as well as Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the Game Boy. He's actually one of the 4 planners credited for this game, though he's credited as the alias Salaryman. The other 3 are Kamecha, Boo Boo Boo, and Munta. As far as I know, we don't know the active identities of the other 3, though there's probably some good estimates you can make based on other projects being worked on by these people at the time. So here in the second part of the Cave of Wonders, we have a water flow with logs going along and in a river. Don't be like me in my first playthrough and think this is an auto-scroller. You actively have full control and can completely just skip forward on the logs. But you need to be careful because there's certain ropes you need to pull down and time letting go of to actively progress onwards because the doors they open will slowly close again. This section is more tense than it looks because the threat of bottomless pits below you if you fall in the water is kind of scary. With that said, there's more than enough resources here to keep you alive. I love this song, by the way. It's probably my overall favorite song in the game, barring the obvious cover of a specific famous song from the movie. But I think it's largely because there's something about it that reminds me, I think it's this instrument that's playing right now, actually, of a good majority of the Final Fantasy V soundtrack. And I love 5's soundtrack. This game actively had 3 composers, Yuki Iwai, Yuko Takehara, and Setsuo Yamamoto. Don't be fooled, by the way, these boulders that are coming down in this section, they will hurt you, of course, but you can actively just safely leap off of them if you get above them, which really threw me off my first time I did it, because I figured they'd just be an overall hitbox. Also, one of the more dastardly hidden red gems is in this stage. Follow this rock down. What should be a bottomless pit actively leads you right back to the river, and this will flow you to a couple of red gems this way. Out of those 3, Yuki Iwai started as a composer on Gargoyle's Quest 2, but it was also a composer for Goof Troop, Mega Man X1 and 2, and several of Capcom's fighting games in the era, specifically Street Fighter Alpha 3 and X-Man vs. Street Fighter. She also composed for several R-Type games and the weird Brave Fencer Musashi sequel on PS2. Her most recent project was Infinity Bullets on mobile platforms. Abu, no! Boo, you done goofed it up. Oh my god. We actively had an old Abu plush growing up. That was one of the ones from when the movie was new that had like Velcro hands. And every time I watched the movie and that scene came up, I would give its touch a scowl for some reason. As soon as Abu touches the gem, the cave begins to collapse. They're going to have to get out of there. So, while not as infamously annoying as the section of this in the Genesis version, the escape from the Cave of Wonders is probably overall the hardest part of the game still here on the Super Nintendo. Specifically because it's also the game's lone full auto-scroller, and the slower auto-scrolling doesn't really mesh well with Aladdin's general control scheme in this game, as either he's just slippery enough to miss the smaller platforms, or the speed of his acrobatics can either make you outpace the screen, or critically miss a jump at the last second. Partner that with having to grab red gems along the way, it's kinda rough. If memory serves from when I recorded this and did some test playthroughs, because I was really trying not to fall into the lava here, of course. The lava in this stage is a little weird in that the fireballs, of course, are just damage sources. But touching the lava itself will do damage. But it's also a bottomless pit you can fall into, and because of that, you really want to be constantly holding down the R button whenever you jump just to get some extra air. With that said, again, take your time with the auto-scrolling and don't try to get too far ahead of the screen, as that is probably what kills me the most in this stage compared to anything else. Shoutouts to two specific red gems coming up here, one actively right now, where you need to hang off this edge to grab it, but either you'll get hit by the projectile coming up out of the lava along the way, or you might rush too hard to try and grab it and just end up completely falling into the lava below. Also, the jump to get that one is really precise off of that rock, and you want to really keep ahead here a little bit for once, as otherwise you're going to need to jump onto these platforms, and that can be surprisingly tough timing. As we get through the rest of the auto-scroller, worth noting the second composer in this game, Yuko Takehara, also composed for Final Fight 2, Mega Man's 6, 7, 10, X, and Power Fighters, and also did work on Zelda 4 Swords on the GBA and several other Capcom fighters like the JoJo fighting game, Street Fighter Alpha 1, and the first Marvel vs. Capcom. That red gem, by the way, is also pretty scary. If anything, this stage is at its worst when you're trying to get the red gems. The third composer, Setsuo Yamamoto, started on this game before working on Mega Man X, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, Strider 2, and Rival Schools alongside several other Capcom fighters like the ones we've already mentioned, like JoJo. At some point, though, along the line, they got promoted to being one of Capcom's sound studio heads, being credited as such for Monster Hunter Tri and Resident Evil 5 Beyond, still holding that title as recently as both the first Monster Hunter Stories and the really recently released Resident Evil 9, which I will probably play at some point, both for myself and the channel. I'm kind of still waiting to get to 4, I won't lie. But that's a whole thing about my LP list, which I'll talk about in a couple other LPs for specific reasons. Now time for the really infamous stage, the carpet ride escape here. Anything that touches you is instant kill, be it the wave of gold lava, the rock walls, or the falling rocks. You want to stay about where I am on the screen, maybe slightly further right on the right third of the screen, but react to what's coming ahead carefully. With that said, if you die enough here, they do just eject you into the next stage, and it's not like you really lose anything outside of the lives for doing that, but this is definitely rough, especially when you get into this really enclosed section here. Those rocks there are probably the biggest problem overall, but yeah, this section's just really rough to play through, I cannot even lie. It took several practice attempts to try and even get that done in 1 or 2 lives, let alone several others. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2 we're going to start off stage 4 with some cutscenes before moving on towards the end of the game. See you guys then.